Good evening, and welcome to the Quiet Library. Tonight, we'll leave behind the quiet streets of Timbuktu and travel north across the Mediterranean to a city where painters, architects, writers, scientists, and craftsmen quietly changed the course of history, not through conquest, but through curiosity. Not by building an empire, but by asking what humanity might become if beauty, knowledge, and imagination were given room to grow. Tonight, we are visiting Florence. The year is 1504. The first light of dawn is beginning to spread across the Tuscan countryside. Soft mist lingers above the Arno River. The air is cool, carrying the scent of damp stone, fresh earth, and bread already baking somewhere beyond the narrow streets. The city has not yet fully awakened. Only a handful of early risers move quietly through the fading darkness. A baker opens the wooden shutters of his shop. A woman sweeps yesterday's dust from her doorstep. Somewhere in the distance, church bells ring the first hour of the morning. Their gentle echoes drift across rooftops of warm terracotta, and you begin walking beside the river. The Arno has shaped Florence for nearly 2,000 years. Long before the Renaissance, long before magnificent churches and celebrated artists, people settled here because the river offered life. It carried fresh water, it connected distant towns, it helped merchants transport wool, grain, wine, timber, and stone throughout Tuscany and beyond. Civilizations have always grown beside rivers. The Nile, the Tigris, the Euphrates, the Thames, and here, the Arno. As the sun rises a little higher, golden light begins to touch the buildings along the water. Their reflections ripple gently across the surface. Ahead, a bridge stretches gracefully across the river. The Ponte Vecchio, the old bridge. People have crossed this point since Roman times. The bridge standing today was rebuilt in the 14th century after a devastating flood swept away the earlier structure. Unlike most bridges, it's lined with tiny shops. Today, they are famous for jewelry. Centuries ago, many belonged to butchers, tanners, and merchants whose work depended upon the river flowing beneath their feet. Even before the streets become crowded, Florence already feels different. There is an unusual sense of purpose here. Nothing appears hurried, yet nothing seems idle. Every doorway hints at a trade. Every street suggests a craft waiting to begin. This is not merely a city where beautiful things are displayed. It is a city where beautiful things are made. And as the morning slowly unfolds, you begin to understand why, more than 500 years later, people still speak the name Florence with quiet admiration. We continue. We leave the river behind and wander deeper into the heart of Florence. The streets become narrower. Tall stone buildings rise on either side, keeping much of the morning sun in gentle shadow. Laundry hangs between upper windows. Flower pots rest on worn stone ledges. Cats stretch lazily on warm doorsteps as the city slowly comes alive. Every few steps, a different sound greets you. The rhythmic scrape of a carpenter smoothing oak, the quiet snip of scissors inside a tailor's workshop, the steady ringing of a distant hammer striking metal. Florence is not a city built upon a single trade. It's a city where hundreds of crafts exist side by side. Each depends upon the others. The baker needs the miller. The miller needs the farmer. The merchant needs the baker. The painter needs the carpenter who prepares wooden panels. The sculptor needs the quarry workers who cut marble high in the mountains. Nothing here exists alone. Everything is connected. As we continue walking, the scent of fresh bread slowly fades. In its place comes something unfamiliar. Linseed oil, warm beeswax, ground minerals, fresh cut wood. An open doorway reveals the source. Inside, several young apprentices already are at work. No one speaks very much. Only the quiet sound of careful hands fill the room. One carefully grinds a deep blue stone into an impossibly fine powder. Another mixes pigments with oil until the colors become smooth and luminous. A third sends a wooden panel so perfectly flat that even the smallest brushstroke will glide across its surface. Painting begins long before the brush ever touches the wood. The colors themselves have traveled extraordinary distances. The brilliant blue comes from lapis lazuli, a rare stone mined in the mountains of what is now known as Afghanistan. Before arriving in Florence, it crossed deserts, mountains, bustling ports, and countless trading sites and cities. It is a quiet reminder that the Renaissance was never created by Florence alone. Ideas, materials, and knowledge had been flowing across continents for centuries. Florence became extraordinary because it welcomed them. Many of the young apprentices working in these rooms will spend nearly a decade learning their craft. At first, they prepare paints, sweep floors, clean brushes, stretch canvases. Only after years of careful observation will they begin painting small details. A hand, maybe, a fold of fabric, perhaps a corner of the sky. Masterpieces are rarely created in a single moment. More often, they are built from thousands of patient moments. We continue our walk. Around the corner, a steady tapping echoes softly through the street. Tap, tap, tap. A sculptor stands before an enormous block of pale marble. Tiny white flakes drift gently to the floor with every strike of the chisel. The figure, hidden inside the stone, has only just begun to unravel. A shoulder, a curve of a neck, the outline of a hand. It is easy to forget, standing here, that some of the greatest works of art in history once looked exactly like this. Not finished, not perfect, but simply becoming. The street grows quieter again. You leave the workshops behind and step into a broad, open square. And for a moment, everything seems to pause. Above you, rising high into the clear Tuscan sky, stands one of the most remarkable buildings ever created. The Cathedral of Santa Maria del Fiore. Most people simply call it the Duomo. Its enormous dome seems almost impossible. Even today, 5 centuries later, architects still admire the ingenuity that made it possible. When construction of the cathedral began in the late 13th century, its builders imagined a dome larger than any built since ancient Rome. There was only one problem: no one knew how to build it. The opening it needed to cover was simply too wide. Traditional wooden scaffolding would have required an enormous forest of timber, far more than Tuscany could easily provide. So for decades, the cathedral stood simply unfinished. Its walls were complete, its towers rose proudly above the city, but the great space at its center remained open to the sky. Many believed it could never be finished. But then, in early 15th century, a goldsmith named Filippo Brunelleschi proposed something extraordinary. Instead of relying on the methods builders had always used, he imagined entirely new ones. His design used two domes rather than one, an inner shell and an outer shell, and between them, a hidden network of stairways and supporting structures. The bricks themselves were laid in an unusual herringbone pattern. Each helped lock the next into the place, preventing the immense structure from collapsing under its own weight as it rose higher and higher. No dome of this scale had been built in Europe for more than 1,000 years. Many doubted it could even be done. Yet, little by little, stone by stone, the impossible became reality. You stand quietly in the square, watching morning light move across the red tiles of the great dome. It feels less like a building and more like a promise, a reminder that human imagination often advances one careful idea at a time. Around you, life continues as it always has. Children chase one another across the square before being called back by parents. A merchant carefully arranges baskets of pears, grapes, and figs beneath a canvas awning. Pigeons flutter into the air as a horse-drawn cart rolls slowly over the worn stones. The cathedral is magnificent, but Florence has never belonged only to great buildings. It belonged as much to the ordinary people who pass beneath them every day. Perhaps that is one of the city's quietest lessons. Great achievements are rarely created by extraordinary moments alone. They are built from countless ordinary mornings, filled with careful work and patient hands, and people who simply refuse to stop building. The square slowly fades behind you, and once again, you find yourself wandering through smaller streets. Here, Florence feels wonderfully ordinary. The Grand Cathedral may dominate the skyline, but the soul of the city lives in these quiet places. A woman hangs freshly washed linen from an upper window. Children laugh as they chase one another around small fountain. An elderly man sits outside his doorway, patiently repairing a leather shoe that has already lived a long life. The smell of herbs drifts from an open kitchen. Rosemary, sage, garlic, warming gently in olive oil. Lunch is still some time away, but preparations have already begun. In Renaissance Florence, meals were simple for most families. Bread, vegetables grown just beyond the city walls, beans, cheese, olives, and maybe seasonal fruit, perhaps a little wine diluted with water, which was often safer to drink than untreated water from some sources. Meat appeared less often on ordinary tables than many people would imagine. It was usually reserved for feast days or celebrations or families fortunate enough to afford it regularly. Life here followed the rhythm of the seasons. Spring brought new vegetables to the markets. Summer filled baskets with figs, peaches, and grapes. Autumn arrived with olives and the grape harvest. Winter encouraged families to preserve what they could for the colder month ahead. Nothing was wasted. Now, as we continue walking, the streets slowly lead toward one of Florence's busiest marketplaces. Merchants have already begun arranging their goods beneath colorful cloth awnings. There are baskets overflowing with walnuts, almonds, fennel, onions, and fragrant bundles of lavender. Nearby, a spice merchant carefully unlocks a wooden chest. Inside are treasures that have traveled farther than almost anyone standing nearby. Cinnamon from Sri Lanka, black pepper from India, cloves from the islands of Southeast Asia. Their journey has taken months, passing through ports in the eastern Mediterranean, across merchant canvas, onto ships, and finally into the markets of Italy. Standing here, it becomes clear that Florence was never isolated. The city flourished because it was connected to the wider world. Ideas arrived alongside spices. Books traveled with merchants. New mathematical methods spread with bankers. Artists borrowed techniques from distant cultures. Even something as ordinary as a handful of pepper tells the story of continents quietly meeting one another. We pause beside a bookseller's stall. Unlike today, books remain precious objects. Each one has been copied carefully by hand. Writing a single volume may take weeks, sometimes months. The finest manuscripts are decorated with delicate illustrations, brilliant colors, and sheets of gold so thin they shimmer in the sunlight. Owning even a modest library is considered a sign of both wealth and learning. Yet something remarkable is beginning to change. Only a few decades earlier, Gutenberg introduced the movable type printing press in Europe. Printed books are slowly becoming more common, and knowledge, once limited to monasteries, universities, and extremely wealthy patrons, is beginning a long journey toward becoming more widely available. But the transformation is gradual. Few people living in Florence realize just how profoundly the printed page will shape the centuries to come. But sometimes history changes quietly, not with the sound of armies, but with gentle turning of a page. As the afternoon sun softens, the street becomes warmer in color. Golden light reflects from pale stone walls, and every narrow alley seems to lead toward another small square. Florence is often remembered through the names of extraordinary people: Leonardo da Vinci, Michelangelo, Botticelli, Raphael. Yet, as you wander through the city, it becomes clear that none of them worked in isolation. Florence itself was their greatest teacher. Every building offered lessons in proportion. Every church revealed new experiments with light. Every crowded marketplace became a study of movement, an expression, in ordinary human life. Artists here were expected to observe the world carefully. Many filled notebooks with sketches of faces they passed in the street: an old merchant counting coins, a child asleep in a wagon, a woman carrying water home from the river. Nothing was considered too ordinary to deserve attention. Perhaps beauty had been hiding in everyday life all along. One workshop is usually unusually quiet. Near the window, sheets of paper are covered with delicate drawings: human hands, birds in flight, the twisting roots of a tree, the muscles of a horse. Whoever made these sketches seems endlessly curious, looking, measuring, comparing, always asking another question. That curiosity became one of the defining ideas of the Renaissance. People increasingly believed that the world could be understood not only through tradition, but through careful observation. Artists studied anatomy to understand how muscles move beneath the skin. Architects measured Roman ruins to discover why ancient buildings had remained standing for centuries. Engineers experimented with gears, bridges, water wheels, and lifting machines. Knowledge was no longer separated into neat categories. Art, science, mathematics, engineering, and philosophy constantly borrowed from one another. A painter needed geometry to understand perspective. A sculptor benefited from studying anatomy. A builder relied upon mathematics as much as stone. The boundaries between different kinds of knowledge became wonderfully blurred. We continue walking, passing a small courtyard where several children kneel in the dust. One carefully draws circles with a patience of someone who's seen the world. Another tries to copy. the leaves on a nearby tree, on the scrap of paper. Learning begins early. Not everyone will become a famous artist. Most never will. Some will become merchants or bankers or tailors or masons or bakers and teachers. Yet throughout Florence, there is a quiet belief that every craft can be improved, every skill can be refined, and every generation can leave something a little better than it found it. Perhaps that is the city's greatest masterpiece. Not a single painting, not a single sculpture, but a culture that believed curiosity itself was worth cultivating. As the shadows grow a little longer, the bells begin to ring once more across the rooftops. Their echoes drift over the workshops, across market squares, and along the gentle curve or the Arno River. For just a moment, the city seems to breathe together. And in that quiet pause, it's easy to understand why Florence became far more than a place on a map. It became an idea that beauty, knowledge, and human imagination could shape the future as surely as stone shapes a city. The afternoon slowly gives way to evening. The brilliant Tuscan sunlight softens into shades of gold, then amber, then rose. The bustle of the marketplace begins to fade. Merchants cover their stalls with heavy cloth. The last customers carry baskets home through the winding streets. The ringing of hammers grows less frequent. One by one, the workshops close their wooden doors. The scent of fresh bread returns as ovens are lit once more. Families gather around simple wooden tables. Candles flicker inside small windows overlooking the streets below. Children tell stories about their day. Neighbors pause to exchange a few quiet words before disappearing inside their doors. The city seems to quietly exhale. You find yourself back beside the Arno River. The water is calmer now. Its gentle current reflects the fading colors of the evening sky. The Ponte Vecchio glows warmly in the last light of day. Its familiar silhouette has watched over Florence through centuries of change. Wars have come and gone. Floods have swept through these streets. Kings, republics, empires, and governments have all risen and fallen, yet the river continues its quiet journey toward the sea, and Florence remains. Perhaps that is the city's greatest lesson. Great civilizations are remembered not only because of the rulers they crowned or the battles they fought. They are remembered because ordinary people chose to create. A mason placing one careful stone upon another, a teacher helping a child learn to read, a baker rising before dawn each morning, an apprentice patiently mixing colors, not knowing that one day those same colors might become part of a masterpiece. History is often told through extraordinary names, but cities are built by ordinary hands, and every generation leaves behind something for the next. A building, a bridge, a book, a discovery, an idea. As darkness settles over Florence, the bells ring one final time. Their echoes drift across the rooftops, across the river, and out toward the quiet hills of Tuscany. The city grows still, not because it has finished creating, but because tomorrow's work can wait until morning. Thank you for spending this peaceful evening in Florence. The library will be here whenever you wish to return. Another volume is already waiting on its shelf. Until then, sleep well and good night.